Welcome to the Professional Diploma in Web Development. If you've always had a keen interest in full-stack web development, then you've come to the right place. In today's lesson, we explore the role of properties and functions, otherwise known as methods in JavaScript. Properties allow us to manipulate characteristics of objects, both in vanilla JavaScript and the HTML document object model, while functions or methods are extremely powerful for building reusable code to perform specific tasks. Welcome back everyone to yet another awesome lesson 5, and today we are going to be discussing JavaScript objects, properties as well as methods, otherwise known as functions. But first, let's have a look at the objectives for today's lesson. Now, our first topic for today is working with JavaScript functions. And essentially, here we will just define JavaScript functions. We'll also understand why they are used in JavaScript and exactly how powerful they are. And then we'll wrap this section up with a couple of code examples. Then we'll move on to understanding JavaScript objects and properties. And this is quite important as we progress through the web development part of this course. And then lastly, as per usual, we'll have a practical demonstration using code. Now, just a quick fun fact before we dive right into the content. Did you know that the term functions and methods are interchangeably used in JavaScript? And this is essentially because they do the same thing. There are subtle differences and we would tend to use it in one scenario as opposed to the other, but at the end of the day, they basically are the same thing. Now, without further ado, let's dive right in and kickstart things with our very first topic, working with JavaScript functions. Now, what exactly are JavaScript functions? Well, essentially, like most programming languages, JavaScript functions is essentially a block of code designed to perform a particular task. Now, a JavaScript function is called when something invokes it, okay, or when something calls it. And this means when there is some action, then you can actually call a function. Another way to think of a function is to think of an object such as a car. And a car can start, it can go forward, you can switch the lights on, you can switch the lights off. These are all functions of an object. And we're going to take a look at a couple of examples pretty soon. Well, now let's actually take a look at an example of what a basic function would look like in terms of its architecture. So what we have here is this function called bake cake, and it takes in two parameters, flour and milk, and then a block of code that is executed when calling this function. Now, functions are written using the same format as that of a variable, simply replacing the var keyword with function. The function name is followed by parentheses. So in this case, we call the keyword function, we then give this function a name, and then we specify that this function requires two parameters, flour and milk. Now, for this example, I want you to think of it like this. So this function is called baking a cake. To bake a cake, you need certain ingredients. In this case, our parameters here is flour and milk, and I'm sure there are a ton of other ingredients that would go into making a cake. And then when calling this function, this block of code over here, this is the one that gets executed as a result of invoking this function. Now, also keep in mind, all functions don't necessarily require parameters. Now, here we have another example of an actual working function, and this function is called food order. So again, we specify the keyword function, we then give the function a name, in this case food order, and this function takes in one parameter, name, or if you think about it, one ingredient. Okay, so we then console log name, and the name is whatever name we pass through as the parameter concatenated with the keywords would like, and then we call the function. Now, this is important. A function will never run if it's not invoked or if it is not called, and this is what the output would look like for this function. So we called the function food order, opened our parentheses and specified the keyword Russian, and then closed the parentheses, and then essentially our output says Russian would like X, Y, and Z, for example. Great stuff. Now, when it comes to functions, there are these things called global and local variables. Now, in the case of global variables, these are variables that have a global scope within a script, and they can be accessed anywhere using our JavaScript code. A local variable, on the other hand, will only be visible where the function is defined. And we can even define these variables within the parameters of our function. Now, also keep in mind, within the body of a function, a local variable takes precedence over a global variable with the exact same name. If you declare a local variable or a function parameter with the same name as a global variable, you effectively hide the global variable and the code will only notice the local variable. Let's have a look at an example. Now, if we take a close look at the code over here, in our first line, we're creating a variable called my_var, and we've assigned it a string value of this is a global variable. So we know this is our global variable in this snippet of code. We then create a function called check_var_scope, and then we supply the block of code that needs to be executed when calling this function. But first, you'll notice that we are calling variable my_var equals this is a local variable. So should this not be the case where we are overwriting our previous variable? No, it's not, because here we are creating a local variable within the scope of our function. We then alert that my_var, and then we call the check_var scope, and this is our output. The local variable again takes precedence over the global variable. Now this is extremely important when writing lengthy scripts in JavaScript. Now let's have another look at the differences between global and local variables and how they behave. So here we've got two blocks of code, and they basically do the same thing. Much like the previous slide where we were just printing out some value. Now, in the first instance, we have this print name function, and we're passing it a string Russian Jade. In the second instance, we are passing a parameter called name, or a variable called name. Now you'll note that both instances have a variable which equals Russian, and that variable is called name. But the output is going to be different for these. In the first instance, we are printing Russian Jade, and the reason for this is because we are not necessarily passing a local variable. So we are actually passing the parameter while calling the function. And then in the second instance, we are actually printing out the variable, the global variable, Russian. Wonderful. Now moving on to the return statement, and the return statement is also quite powerful when used with functions. Now in this example over here, we have a function called myFunction, and this function does not take in any parameters. So when the function is called, some code is executed. We then call the return keyword because we want to return some value for further computation later on. And this basically allows us to take whatever information this function processes and then return a value so that we can do some extra tasks and extra work with that value. Now let's take a closer look at the return statement and see how we can actually use the return statement to perform some sort of mathematical computation. Now in our first three lines of code, we have three variables. We have var num1, which is equal to 5. We have var num2, which is equal to 20. And then we have an empty variable called result. Now keep in mind, this is an undefined variable. It does not hold any value. But the point behind this is because we are going to store the returned result inside of this variable and print it out. So we have a function called multiply with two parameters, first number and second number. And then we have a return statement which returns the parameter first number multiplied by second number. Now this code gets executed when we call the function. And in our next line of code, we then take that result variable we had and we set that equal to the function, and we pass num1 and num2, which is 5 and 20 respectively. We then print that result out using console log, and voila, we have 100 as a result. Pretty powerful, right? Now that we have a firm grasp of functions, we can move on to our next topic, and that's JavaScript objects as well as properties. Now, JavaScript is designed on a simple object-based paradigm. An object is a collection of properties, and a property is an association between a name and or a key pair value. A property's value can be a function, in which case this is known as a property method. Okay, and this is how we differentiate between methods and functions. They are the same thing, but when we assign a function as a property to an object, they become methods. In addition to objects that are predefined in the browser, you can define your own objects, and you might be familiar with a couple of these objects that exist in the client or the browser. We've already worked with the alert function and the console. Objects are variables too, but objects can contain many values. So here we have a very typical example of how we are actually creating an object. And in this example, we are creating a car object. Now, before we go further, keep in mind, even a car as an object has various properties. And this includes things like make, the model, the tire size, the size of the doors, all of these things, okay? They make up the properties of the vehicle. And in this instance over here, we are assigning three different properties. First, the make of the car, which is Porsche, the model of the car, which is Cayman GT4, and the color of the car, which is red. And if we print out, or if we console log car.make, we are targeting the .make property, or the make of the car, which is the property, right? And this is the output that we have, Porsche. Now, this is what the Cayman GT4 looks like. For those of you who are actually interested, I think it looks pretty sweet. Now, much like variables, we can also update the values or the properties of an object. In this instance, we have the exact same line of code where we've got the make, the model, and the color of our car. We then update those values by simply calling car.make, which is the property, and we set that equal to Kia. We set the model equal to Serato. We set the color of the car equal to white, and then we console log the make of the car. And now instead of getting Porsche, we have Kia. And for those of you interested, this is what the Serato or the Kia Serato looks like. Not as good looking as the Porsche, right? Now we can also create objects using functions. And in this example over here, that's exactly what we are doing. We have our first line of code as standard. The only difference here is we are now creating a function called build car to actually build the car. So we call the keyword function. We then specify the name of the function, which is build car. We assign the different values. So the make of the car is Lexus, the model is LC500, and the color is white. And then once the car is built as part of this function, we then console log something to the console, which is your car color, make, as well as the model was successfully created. And then we essentially call that function, and this is what the code output looks like for that. Your white Lexus was successfully built. Now, since we are binging on cars, let's take a look at what the LC500 looks like. I think it looks pretty sleek. Now, the question certainly comes to mind. What happens if we want to create a new car several times? The issue with this approach is that if we have to use a function, we're going to have to use a different function for different kinds of cars. And if you think about it, that can be quite tedious. Now, there is a workaround here, and that is called constructors. And the way constructors work is that they allow us to create sort of empty objects or different objects of the same type. In this case, that's the car. Now, I want you to take a step back and think about it like this. If the car is the object, then the constructor is essentially the manufacturing plant, right? Or the factory even. Now, let's have a look at the code. So we have our basic function over here, build car, with 3 parameters, the make, the model, and the color. And this is how it differs, first of all, from the previous set of code. And then we have this keyword in front of the .make and model and color. Now, this dot keyword essentially implies that whenever creating this new object, whatever parameter I'm passing in this instance, that is going to be the value of certain properties, okay? And then we essentially just alert this message when creating the car. Now, to do this, we have to create a variable called, in this case, my new car, and set it equal to new build car. Now, the new keyword implies that we are building a new car, and the build car function takes in 3 parameters. Again, the make, the model, and the color. In this case, we have the Dodge, which is the Hellcat, and it's in silver, okay? And this is what our output looks like. Your silver Dodge Hellcat was successfully created. Now, again, let's have a look at what the Hellcat actually looks like. That is one badass car, if I do say so myself. Wonderful. Now let's start talking about creating methods. And this is something we mentioned earlier. Now remember, a method is essentially a function, but a function of a property of an object. So let's take a look at an example. And this one can look quite intimidating, but essentially it's more or less the same code. We still have the this.make, the this.model, the this.color, and so on, and the alert that we had previously. The only difference here is that we are now creating a function as a property. And this function is called, or the name of this property is called start engine, and we associate a function with it. And this function just alerts, vroom, your engine has started running. Great. And then we have another function at the bottom, this.lights. We assign that to a function, and we simply just alert your car lights have been turned on. Now, when we create our new object over here, we are essentially going to get the same output that we did before, because remember, it's part of our function. This alert is part of our function. Then we move on to the second part, where we are actually calling the method or the function on the my new car that we just created, and this gives us an output of vroom, your engine has started running. And then lastly, we call another function or method lights on, and then we get an output of your car lights have been turned on. Wonderful stuff. Now, I know the code here can be quite intimidating, but when we get to the practical demonstration, this is all going to make a lot more sense. But before we do that, let's have a look at what's coming up in our next lesson. In our next lesson, we will start bringing it all together. Everything we've learned in front-end web development thus far. This includes HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Our next lesson will lay the foundation for the major project as we come to the end of this course. Much like this lesson, it's going to be quite code intensive, so ensure that you are fairly comfortable with everything we've covered in web development up until this point. And it's time for that part in our lesson, the practical demonstration. I know most of you have been looking forward to this, so without further ado, let's code. Now welcome back to yet another practical demonstration, everyone. In this demonstration, I actually want to show you, as always, what we will be working towards. And essentially what we've built here is, I know the code can look quite intimidating, but it's going to make a lot of sense once we actually build all of this out. So the code that we have over here is a food ordering system, or actually an online food ordering system. And the idea behind this is that if we run the code, we get this message that alerts to us. Hi there, thanks for choosing Burgermart as your preferred online ordering system. Below is our menu. So this company, well, sort of, basically sells you a meal that you can build by yourself with burgers, fries, and sodas, and they each have their own price associated with them. Now, if we click OK, we then have to select our items. To start placing your order, select the burger. Now, I'm going to go with the Big Chief because I like my burgers big. Okay. Into the number 3 because it's at index 3 over here. I'll then select a small fries because I'm trying to keep the carbs low. And then I'll go with a small soda because I also want to keep the sugar low. And then the system will ask me, do I want my meal to be delivered? And I'll say yes. And then eventually it will print to me my order, which is the item, the price of the item, as well as the delivery fee if I have chosen a delivery fee, and then obviously my order total. Now without further ado, let's dive in and start building the system. Now, one thing to note before we actually get started, I will be navigating between Atom as well as JS Fiddle. And the reason for this is I want us to become familiar with JS Fiddle and Atom once again, or mostly Atom actually, because we will be using Atom in future. The idea here is that we'll write our code in Atom and then copy and paste that code over to JS Fiddle, our sandbox environment, where we'll run our code. Okay, so just keep that in the back of your mind as we progress through this practical. Now, let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create my variables that I use to store some of my data. And I'm going to go with var burger name. And this is essentially just going to hold my burger for me. Okay. And I need to save this as well, of course. I'll go save as. Remember, I want to save this as a JS file, which is a JavaScript file. So I'll just say L5 script .js. Excellent. And then obviously my keywords will be highlighted accordingly. I'm going to create another variable called fries name, another variable to hold the soda name, or the name of the soda that I'm going to choose, soda name, and then burger, actually var burger total. Then I'm going to go with fries total. I need to insert the keyword var. Remember, this is a variable. And then finally, I will have a variable that holds the price or the total of my soda. So I say soda total. Okay, so let's review what we have so far. We have variables that's going to hold the name of the item and the actual price or the total of that one specific item. And then I'll move on to creating a variable that's going to store my order total, the sum of every single item as well as the delivery fee if I do have one. And I'll set this equal to 0 because for the time being it will be 0. And then for this one, I will create a Boolean value. So I'm going to call this one delivery confirm. And the idea behind this is that this is going to be a Boolean and it's going to be set to false for the time being. Now, the reason I'm using this variable is because I want to flag whether or not the customer actually does decide to choose delivery or not. Initially, they're not choosing delivery. We give them that option. And then if they do choose delivery, then eventually we'll actually go ahead and update this to a true Boolean value. Great. Now I want to get that alert out, the initial alert in the practical, right? So I'll just write a alert statement over here. And I'm just going to, I'll probably just copy and paste this. The reason for that is because it would take a very long time to actually have to write all of this out. Okay. And do keep in mind, if you want access to all of this, the working code that is available to you in the summary notes. Now let's just review what we have so far. We've got our variables. We have that initial alert. So hi there. Thanks for choosing Bergamot and so on. And below is our menu. Now, what you'll see here is this weird little sign that we've never worked with before, which is \n. Okay, now what is this used for? Let me actually show you how all of this works. So if I highlight this, actually I'll highlight up until the chief over here. I can even take it a step further and I will highlight up until fries, small fries, the price of the small fries, which is this one over here. Okay, so I'll copy that, navigate to JS Fiddle, I'll paste this. Now you'll see it's not being highlighted in JS Fiddle, which is why I also wanted to actually work in this environment. I just need to add my quotation mark over here. Now if I run this, in order to get these spaces over here, that is what we use the in for. That's how we skip a line in JavaScript. So that's basically what this alert is over here, just in case you're wondering. Okay, if you want to type it out, you can also just copy and paste it from the summary notes. So I've got my alert going over there. Now the next thing I want to go and do is I effectively want to start writing my code out, such as my prompts. So to do this, I'll just skip a line. So var, and I will call this one burger. Var is equal to a prompt object. Remember, a prompt object takes in some user input. Okay, and I will say to start placing your order, select a burger. Okay, now I'm actually going to type this one out because I want to show you how all of this works in action if we type it out. Okay, so select a burger, I'll just add a semicolon over there, and I'm going to go \n. That puts me on a new line, and I'll do it again so that I can have that spacing. So I'm skipping 2 lines essentially. Okay, and then I will just say 1. This actually needs to be inside of my parentheses. Okay, also don't forget that. So I'll say 1. This is going to be the first item on my list, which is the large dusty. Okay, and then another colon, $3, that is the price. Okay, now I'll move on, and I need to basically insert another line break. Okay, so go in, and then my second one is going to be small dusty. These are such odd names for burgers. And then my small dusty needs a price as well, and the price for my small dusty is $2. Wonderful. And then I need to skip another line for the final item, and again \n, \n, and this is going to be number 3 on my list. Okay, which is the Big Chief, the burger that I actually ordered in demoing this to you. So what I'll do now is add that $in, and I'm going to run this code so we can actually see and make sure everything is working just fine. Okay, so if I head back over to JS Fiddle, paste this, if I run this now, it's going to do everything it's supposed to do. I still need to add the rest of the code. So over here, let's see what we have. So we've got our first ordering list where it prompts us to select a burger. So we know everything is working just fine. Excellent. So I'll just go and say, okay, clean this up because I don't need it for now. Remember, I'm just using this for my testing environment. And now I'll move on to creating the variable that holds the prompt for my fries. So I'm going to say fries var is equal to, I'm just going to copy over the prompt that I already have. There we go. And then finally, I need another variable for my soda. So I'm going to say var soda var. Okay, and this is equal to yet another prompt. Great, so now that we have all the copying and pasting out of the way, we can actually get started with some really fun code. So the next thing we need to do is we need to write a function, and this function is going to actually be somewhat of a constructor, because we want to build a new order every time someone uses the system. So if you think about it, an order is an object, right? And an order has many properties, like the size of the order, the subtotal, the total. All of these things are properties of an order. And then we also have methods associated with an order, which we'll get to at a later stage. But the first thing we need to do now is build out that function. Now, if you remember correctly from the slides, to get started with building a constructor, we need to call the function keyword. So I'm going to say function, and then I'm going to give this function a name, and I will call it meal order. Okay, remember the camel casing, very, very important. And this specific function, the specific constructor, requires 3 parameters. Okay, I need the burger, I need the fries, and I also need the soda from the users. The user needs to pass all of this to me using the numbers, the integers. And then I will open up my curly braces, and this is where I will start writing out my code. And the code here is going to be for execution. Okay, this block of code gets executed when we run this function. So I'm going to start by specifying the keyword this burger is equal to burger, and then I will say if the user, now this is a conditional statement, if the user passes in a specific burger or number, then do something, right? So if this dot burger that the user passes in that instance is equal to 1, then what I want to do is I want the burger's price to be set, the total. Okay, but before I even do that, I need to set the name of the burger as well as the total. So I'll say over here, then burger name is equal to the large dusty. Okay, and then I also want to update the total for this burger, the total that the variable that carries this total. So I'll say burger total is equal to 3. Now 3 is the price of the burger, if you remember correctly. Okay, so if we actually reference, we hop over to our prompt statement over here. So the first burger on the list is the large dusty, and it comes in at 3. Okay, so we set the large dusty as the name of burger name. We set the price, which is 3 over here, equal to the burger total, which is 3. Great. Now, if this is not the case and it's something else, we need an else if statement, if you remember correctly. Let's actually just space this out so we can actually see what's going on with our code. It just looks a lot more visual appealing because we've got an if statement nested inside of a function. So then what I'll go and do, and I'll say is else if this is the case, then do something else. Okay, so I'll just space that out. So else if this burger, I can just copy and paste. Remember, reusable code is always good when you need it. If the user pushes or selects option 2, then they want the small dusty instead, and the small dusty comes in at $2. So if 2, then set the burger name. Let's actually just grab this. We can copy and paste this as well. Then we want the small dusty is what we said, and if it's going to be the last option, then we want the big chief. Now keep that in mind because that's quite important over here. So I'm going to say small dusty. I will then also say $2, and that looks just about right. Now I can copy and paste this one more time, paste it over here, and if burger option is equal to 3, then I want the big chief. Big chief, and the price of the big chief, the most expensive on the list, is $7 if you remember correctly. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is we actually have to work on the fries side of things. Now to do this, essentially what I need to do is I just need to recreate the exact same approach that I took here, but first I need to get the user's input. Okay, that's the most important part here, and to do that I'm going to do exactly the same thing I did before, and I'll type the keyword this dot fries is equal to fries. Wonderful. And then I'm going to just copy and paste the code I have over here because again, I'm doing the same thing. So reusable code, very, very important. Skip a couple of lines just to space it out. Now I will just change some parameters over here. I will say instead of burger, I will say fries. And for this one over here, I will say fries as well, because we are now testing the condition on fries. Keep that in your mind. So the name over here is also going to change. So I'll say fries name. I'll say fries total. And likewise, I'll do exactly the same thing over here. Fries and fries. Wonderful. Now the last thing I want to do, and basically the most important thing here, is just work on the soda in terms of the functionality. That is extremely important because then our code just doesn't run and we won't get that output that we actually seek with the order total later on at the end. So again, same approach. This dot soda is equal to soda. Close it off. And I will just copy and paste this over here. We also just need to make sure that our totals are correct over here. So the large dusty, we actually need to change this to large fries and small fries. But according to our menu, we just need to double check the order of it. So the small fries came first and the large fries came second with $1 and $2 respectively. So I'll go small fries. And I will change it over here to 1. Was it $1? It was $1, I believe. So small fries, $1, $2. Great. And then this over here, I will change to large fries, which came in at $2. Great. So small fries, large fries. Let's just double check our code. We want to minimize bugs early on so that they don't become a headache later on. And then the last thing I want to do is the soda part. So I'll just grab this over here. And there's also this very neat little trick that I want to show you when it comes to scripting in Atom, where you can actually select multiple lines of things and change it. So if I click over here and I hold down Control on a Windows system and I click over here and I click over here as well as here, I can actually just backspace all of this, which makes it really, really efficient in terms of typing your code out. And then the soda over here, I'll do the same. Can even highlight it like this while holding down Control. I'll say soda. Let's just check the price of that. So the order was small soda, large soda, $1 and $1.5. So then if 1, then 1, if 2, then $1.5. Great. So I'm going to save this and make sure everything is intact. So that is probably the most important part of this code, okay? Or this function specifically. Now what I want to do is I want to create another function that's going to allow me to calculate the order total at a later stage. But before I even do that, there's something more important. I need to work on my methods for this object. Okay. Now the first method I'm going to work on now, and the only one I'll be working on for now, is just asking and confirming the user if they actually want a delivery on the order. So to do this, I need to pretty much do the same thing as like with a property. If you remember from our earlier discussion when it comes to methods and functions. So I'll just say delivery equals function. This one takes in no parameters. We'll just space that out. And I will create a variable here called ask delivery. Sort of like ask the person, ask the customer if they want their meal to be delivered. And I'll set this equal to a prompt. And that prompt will have a string that says, would you like your meal to be delivered? Gosh. Wonderful. And then just add that question mark. Okay, stuff. So once I've got that prompt going, I need to now test for a condition. Okay, so I'll say if whatever the user passes in, if the result of the prompt, which is assigned to ask delivery, if that is equal to the keyword yes. Now I'm going to keep it in small caps over here. Remember, things are case sensitive when it comes to JavaScript. So if the user does want delivery, then that variable that I created earlier, delivery confirm, set that equal to true. Okay, so it's no longer false, it's now true. Wonderful stuff. So I can move on. So this is my function over there. And then the next thing I want to do is I might just want to alert the user. Actually, I can work on my construct at a later stage. I want to work on my display order. That's the next thing I want to do. But then there's a couple of other things. So this is the thing about programming. You really need to think hard about how you would like to build your code out, because everything works in a modular fashion. So what I'll actually do is I will create a function for calculating the total of my order. Okay, because that just makes a lot more sense. So this opens up here. And if we check, it closes up there. So I will come to the bottom of here and I will create a new function called calculate total. It's going to take all the items in my basket and just calculate them. And this was going to take in 3 parameters: burger, fries, and our last one is going to be soda. Okay, so it's burger, fries, and soda. There we go. Open that up, and inside of here I'm simply just going to return the sum of whatever the user passes in here for this function. Okay, so that's going to be burger plus fries plus soda, and then close that off. Now remember, the return function or the return keyword returns something after a function has been executed. Wonderful. So I'll just actually don't need to close this off here. So I've got my calculate functions going to take burger, fry, soda. I'm just making sure everything is on point. Wonderful. Now I can actually move on to my function for the displaying the order if I wanted that. So what I'll do is make sure this one ends here, and I will create another method or function, this dot display the order is equal to a function. By the way, we call this an anonymous function, a function that doesn't necessarily have a name. Okay, that's also just something worth noting. So if delivery confirm is equal to false, then I want to do something specific. So just indent this, open this up, space it. If the delivery confirm is equal to false, I want to alert something. Right, so I can take two, I can branch out here if I wanted to. Then I just want to display the order without any sort of delivery fee. But if that's not the case, then do the alternative, which is add that delivery fee to my total and then display that. Okay, so there's two options for displaying here, one with delivery and one without delivery. So I'm going to copy and paste exactly everything I've already written out, and we'll work through it together. Okay, so your order details are below. Skip a line, skip a line. The burger name concatenated with a $sign to the total. Okay, so this is going to give me the name of the burger, which is either going to be Big Chief, Small Dusty, and so on. And then I'm going to do exactly the same with the fries name. So show me the fries name, show me the total, as well as with the soda and so on. Okay, and then also display my order total. So display this text, skip a couple of lines. You'll see I'm skipping quite a few lines here. So skip a couple of lines, and at the bottom show the keywords or the string your order total is $sign concatenated with whatever the order total is going to be. Now we still have to work out this part, the order total we still need to calculate, which is why we created this function at the bottom. Okay, but this is going to return the total of all of those items together, and then we'll plug that into our order total over there. Okay, so let's actually get to it. But first I have to branch out with my second condition in the event that this condition here is not met. Okay, so if the customer actually decides that they want delivery, we need to run this else statement. So I'll just move this down, indent this slightly, and I'll say else to this block of code, or this line of code rather. Bring this down slightly, and I'll copy and paste what I already have. Now let's assess what's going on over here. So if we have a look at this code, we are alerting the exact same message that we are alerting here. The only difference here is that we are including the delivery fee on a separate line after skipping. And skipping again, we then have this message that says your order total is dollars concatenated with the order total plus 5. Now this plus 5 is the delivery fee and it's a fixed fee. So this will be added to whatever the total is of my order. Wonderful stuff. Now the next thing I need to go and do is I need to make sure that I'm returning the value here and adding this value to my order total over here. Okay, because remember order total is currently sitting at 0. So we are running a calculate total function to do this. And what I'll do is I'll just bring it up slightly, and just below this, after we've checked all the items that the user added to their cart, I will essentially then just bring that line of code below this. Okay, so my order total is going to be updated with the value that is returned from the calculate total function. And remember, this function takes in 3 parameters, and I'm going to go with burger total because I want whatever burger total the price of the burger is. I want the fries total, and I also want the soda total. Lovely. So if all is good, then we should be fine. Now there is just one more thing to do before we actually go and decide to copy and paste it over to JS Fiddle. We also want to make sure that we don't have any bugs, but there's just simply again one last thing that we need to do, and that is to create a new object whenever the code runs, because remember we created a constructor earlier. So I'm going to say new order equals new. Okay, and this is going to equal a new meal order. So I'm going to be building an object of a meal order, and I'll simply pass through the parameters that I need here, and the parameters I need here is going to be the variable of whatever the user passed when they were prompted. So if they were prompted to pass through a burger choice, a fries choice, or a soda choice, they would essentially then pass in either 1, 2, or 3 as the value, and then that would actually determine which burger they chose and the price, if you remember correctly. So I'm going to say burger var, and keep in mind all of this entire list over here essentially comes from that prompts that we had earlier. And I'll say fries var, and then lastly I'll say soda var. Okay, let's make sure everything's intact. Great stuff. Now I need to go and call those methods that I created for that object. The first one is delivery. And why? Because we want to make sure that the user either decides they want or they don't want a delivery before we display the order, which is going to be the second method I'll call. So after creating this, I'll just say new order dot delivery, and then I'll say new order dot display order. And this one also doesn't have any parameters. So let's scroll up, make sure everything's intact. This looks good. This is the code we kind of need to be most concerned about. Okay, because our if else can go wrong at if you look at that, we've got a typo over here, so let's just correct that one. And then this also needs to be soda, okay, because we're testing on the soda condition here and not the fries. So I'll update this to soda. Let's see, make sure everything is good. Save it first. Small soda, large soda. Calculated the total. We've got our methods. We've got the branching depending on whether or not the user is actually going to decide to take delivery or not. And all looks good. Let's just indent this one. Actually not, let's keep it over there. Save it again. Copy paste. Always remember to save unless you are overwriting your code. So let's paste it over into JS Fiddle and see what we actually get. So I'm going to run it, and everything seems fine. So my list is actually popping up. So my small fries, my large, my soda, my burgers, my message at the top, everything looks good. So I'll run this, and once again I'm going to go for the Big Chief because I'm a big fan of the Big Chief. I'm going to go for a small fries because I'm still trying to keep the carbs low, and I'm quite thirsty actually, so I'm going to go with a large soda. Now it should prompt me for delivery, and I will say yes over here, And there we go. Voila, we've got our order being alerted to us. So your order details are below. My big cheeseburger of $7, my small fries of $1, and my large soda of $1.5 gives me something like what, 9.5. And if we add the delivery fee, we now have $14.5 in total, which is great. So we know this is working. Let's run the code one more time. And in this instance, I'm going to exclude delivery to see if there's any changes in my output. So then I'll say, let's go with a large dusty. I'll go with a small fries, and I'll go with a small soda, and I'll say no. You can actually type in anything here. Nothing's going to happen because we don't have a condition to satisfy the keyword no. So if I click that, my order total is $5, which works out perfectly because 3 plus 1 plus 1 gives me $5. Wonderful stuff. Now, I hope this session actually helps you a lot in terms of comprehending everything we've done so far in JavaScript. And in our next practical, we're actually going to bring JavaScript, HTML, and CSS together. So I really hope to see all of you there.